Hi, I'm Dr. Reza. I work in aesthetic medicine. We basically work in a number of different sections of medicine. Aesthetic medicine was something that came together with a few of the leftover treatments of some of the other specialities, but also new things that didn't exist before. We use things like botulinum toxins, fillers, platelet-rich plasma, and I think that's where there's a nice overlap between aesthetic medicine and regenerative medicine, which is the new frontier where we work with things like stem cells and platelet-rich plasma. The other thing we do is we work on people who have been injured. For example, we treat scars, burn scars, acute injuries, and it's a nice, exciting field to be in because it's new and it's evolving. For us to be able to do what we do, we need a whole host of people to be able to support this. We are the end user interface between the patients and the products. But for us to be able to do that, we need people like biologists, pharmacists, BSc biomedical people. These are the people who work on creating the product, on making sure that we have good fillers, but also to do the things like the research into how do we use stem cells, how do we process them and culture them, and what do we do with it from there. So we work on pretty much the art and science of it, but most of the science comes in the products from the people that we rely on. So stem cells are fairly new. There's many ways and many applications that you can use them. Stem cells are very smart cells. If you introduce them to tissue that's damaged or tissue that's under pressure, they know to help that tissue, they know to heal it or emulate it or simulate them. And so it's something that we're actively working with now. The goal here is to create tissue systems. So it means we'll start working on different layouts of actual cells coordinated in regions that you can use to implant into people. And later on then the goal is really to have full organ systems that you can give to individuals and implant so that they don't need to wait for someone to die before they get things like livers and hearts. I've always been very interested in learning and in trying new things, and I've always looked at things and said, well, is that the best way that you should be sitting in the chair? Always just to learn what people are doing and then to see if there was a way to improve it. The idea of the plane actually came more from a business perspective. I love planes. I've always wanted to become a pilot. When I was a kid, I thought I'd end up a pilot. So I'm busy doing that now. I thought if I wanted to make a plane, it needed to be unique. But I thought, well, vertical takeoff, that doesn't exist. Let me start looking into this. Aeronautical engineers are very important for a project like this, of course. As you get through certification and get to the end stages of, again, it becomes even more important because they need to sign off on the design work to make sure that everything is safe and ready for people to be able to sit into the airplane. In the design and the layout of the airplane, mechanical engineers, materials and design engineers, we've got maintenance that needs to be taken into account, electrical engineers, even the pilots. We've got test pilots and they give us input and they say, well, I think that you need to have the throttle over here, not over there. When we look out, we need to be able to see where we're landing. I've always been here in Joburg. I spent most of my school life at Sacred Heart College, an observatory just over the hill here. And then I went to Crawford and Sandton to finish. Then I went to study at WITS, and that's where I got my medical degree from. I've always been studying, and I think I'll always be studying until I die. And it's not to be seen as a chore or something that has to be done, but more something that interests me and adds to my life and adds value to the things that I make. Once I went to a Mensa meeting, and the speech that the chairman gave was about how real genius happens when you take the knowledge of one field and you apply it to an unrelated field. Because the people in those fields will always be studying their fields, but they don't get the right amount of exposure to outside ideas. And when you can cross those concepts, you start to come up with new things that nobody could have thought of before because it just wasn't in their domain. So that's one of the things that I think is always quite important to keep in mind, is to open your mind, expose yourself to as many different elements as possible. And if you find that there's something interesting in a certain area, that's also a little bit of guidance. There's something calling you from, like in my case, it was the airplanes. Yes, I'm a beginner in this new field, but I'm not a beginner in anything. And I have achieved things if I put my mind to it. And that keeps me going until I'm able to actually then make a real difference in that specific field. So I want kids to understand that they should never feel like idiots for trying something difficult, for trying something new. The only idiot is the one who tries nothing.